The world of Miziori was a soft green jewel on the edge of galactic consensus space. To the Lorvek, it was a successful, quiet settlement. To the humans who lived there, it was home. They tended its soil and breathed its mild air, living under a peace that was, to the overseers, perfectly maintained. Min knelt in the damp earth of his greenhouse. His hands, stained with soil, carefully separated the roots of a creeping blue fern. Botany was his function for the consensus, but it was his private joy. Here, among the sighing leaves and the smell of wet growth, the quiet in his mind felt natural, not enforced. His sister, Lee, worked at the settlement's archive, a grand name for a small building where she cataloged crop yields and weather data. Her real work was in the unofficial files, the personal diaries and image logs the humans quietly kept. They lived under the Edict of Unrecall. The galactic consensus believed in harmony above all. Any event that caused significant disruption, a conflict, a rebellion, a protest, was not merely suppressed. It was universally unrecalled. Advanced technology and biochemistry erased the memory from the minds of all involved species. It was as if the event had never happened, for the greater peace. But human minds were stubborn. They did not erase cleanly. Instead, survivors of an unrecalled event suffered from echo dreams. Vivid, painful flashes of the forgotten truth would invade their sleep, leaving behind a deep, formless sadness upon waking. The consensus saw this neural plasticity as a design flaw, a dangerous one. From a circular station that orbited Miziori in serene silence, a Lorvek named Kale monitored the settlement. His skin was a pale gray, and his large, dark eyes reflected the calm light of his screens. He was a historian, though his work was not to study history, but to help manage its disappearance. He believed in the edict. He had seen the chaotic, bloody records of the time before it. The peace, he thought, was worth the price of a few forgotten days. Yet, the human files always gave him a faint unease. Their compliance reports were perfect, but their biometrics showed unexplained stress spikes during sleep cycles. Echo dreams. On Miziori, Min discovered something. In a shaded corner of a forest, he found a patch of delicate, bell-shaped flowers the color of moonlight. They were native to Miziori, deemed unimportant. But Min noticed they only opened at night, releasing a faint silver pollen. Curious, he brought a sample to his greenhouse. Days later, he was repairing a leaking pipe in the same room as the flowering plant. The spray of water caught the pollen in the air, creating a shimmering mist. Min breathed it in. That night, his sleep was not haunted by his usual vague echo dream, the one that left him grieving for a friend he could not remember losing. This time, the dream was shockingly clear. He saw his father, young and afraid, standing in the settlement square with others. He saw a shadow descend from a consensus shuttle and a wave of dazzling light. He felt his father's confusion, then a crushing emptiness. He woke with a gasp, but the memory did not fade into sadness. It remained, sharp and terrible, in his mind. The pollen had somehow made the echo solid. He told Lee. She, too, had echo dreams, of a woman who taught her old songs. An aunt, perhaps, whose name and fate were gone. With scientific caution and desperate hope, they experimented. They found that if two people inhaled the pollen, now named the Nisus flower, while holding a physical object linked to a shared memory, the echo dream would not just happen, it would manifest. A shaky, holographic image would appear in the air between them, formed of light and pollen. One evening, in the secure basement below the archive, they tried it. Lee brought a rusted button she had always kept, its origin unknown. They sat facing each other, the flower between them. They breathed in the shimmering dust, and Lee held the button tight. The air grew cold. A ghostly image flickered to life. A younger Lee, maybe 10, was being pulled from the arms of a sobbing woman. The woman's mouth was open in a silent scream. A consensus official, his features blurred but his gray Lorvek silhouette clear, stood between them. Then, a flash. The image of the woman dissolved, not into nothing, but into a look of utter, vacant peace on young Lee's face. The hologram faded. Lee was trembling. Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes blazed. They took her. They took her from me, and then they took me from me. For the first time, the unrecalled was not a feeling. It was a fact. It was a theft. Above them, Kale noted an anomaly on his scans. A small, localized energy spike in the human settlement, neither mechanical nor weapons-based. It registered as a unique bioluminescent signature, mixed with human neuroelectrical activity. It was anomalous. It was, by definition, a potential disruption. He flagged it for review, his long fingers pausing over the screen. The humans were quiet, their compliance perfect. Yet here was a tiny bloom of something unknown. He decided, as was protocol, to schedule a routine inspection. He typed an order for Inspector Velt to visit Miziori for a standard wellness calibration. He did this not with malice, but with a dull sense of duty. The peace had to be maintained. The garden had to be weeded. The memory, now solid, changed everything. For Min and Lee, the world looked different. The calm green of Miziori seemed painted over something older and more raw. The soft hum of consensus machinery sounded like a held breath. They moved through their days with a new care, carrying a secret that felt both heavy and sharp. Lee could not stop thinking of the woman's face. She started to search the physical archive, the real one of paper and faded plastic sheets that the consensus never checked. She looked for gaps. She found them. Crop yield logs that skipped a season. Population lists where names simply vanished between one entry and the next, with no note of death or departure. A silent scream in data form. She began to talk quietly to others. She started with Tay, an old engineer who fixed the water recyclers. His hands were scarred and steady. She asked him, over tea, if his sleep was ever troubled. Tay's eyes, which usually crinkled with a joke, went flat. I dream of a bridge, he said, his voice low, and a weight in my hands. Tool, maybe. And then a feeling, like falling asleep standing up. He looked at her. Why do you ask, little archivist? Lee did not answer directly. Instead, she showed him the rusted button. She told him about the flower. Tay listened, his face becoming very still. He did not call her crazy. He just nodded slowly. They unrecalled the strike at the old square, he whispered, as if saying it made it more real. 23 years ago. I think I was there. Meanwhile, Min worked with the Nisus flowers. He learned their rhythms. The pollen was only potent at a certain stage of bloom, under the light of Miziori's small moon. He grew more in hidden corners of his greenhouse, shielded behind fast-growing ferns. He tested the pollen's range. It needed a catalyst, a strong emotion tied to the unrecalled moment, and a physical touchstone. A button, a piece of cloth, a song. He brought his findings to Lee and Tay in the archive basement. It's not a weapon, Min said, holding a delicate silver blossom. It's a mirror. It only shows what's already inside us, what they tried to take out. Tay picked up the flower, his rough fingers gentle. A mirror can be a powerful thing, he said. If you show a man his own dirty face, he might get angry, but he might also wash. The decision formed slowly without a big speech. It came from shared looks over meals, from hands squeezing shoulders. Others joined. Sue, a quiet woman who ran the nursery, dreamed of an empty crib. G, a young farmer, had echoes of running through smoke. They all had their pieces of the past, their unrecalled sorrows. They gathered, a handful of them, in the basement. They shared their objects, a child's sock, a broken blade, a harmonica. And with the Nisus pollen, they shared their memories. The holograms were painful to see. The strike at the old square was not a war. It was a protest. Humans, including a younger Tay, standing together, holding up signs about unfair resource quotas. They were scared but determined. Then the consensus shuttles landed. Not with soldiers, but with smooth, disc-like devices that pulsed with a soft light. The light washed over the crowd. People did not fall dead. They just stopped. Their faces went slack. Their signs dropped from their hands. They stood, blinking, peaceful and empty. Then they were led away. The memory ended there. The group sat in silence after the last hologram faded. The air was thick with silver dust and grief. Sue was crying without a sound. G clenched his fists. They didn't kill them, Lee said, her voice hard. They killed the why. They made it so we couldn't even remember why we were angry. They made our own past a ghost. Up in his orbital station, Kale reviewed the inspection order. Inspector Velt was known for his efficiency. A wellness calibration was a full neural scan and a gentle chemical flush to smooth out any troublesome echo dreams. It was considered a mercy by the consensus, a cleaning of painful, faulty memories. Kale pulled up the old report from the date period Lee had identified. The official log for that day was bland. Routine atmospheric adjustment. Minor sonic disturbance noted. Population compliance reaffirmed. There was no mention of a square, of a protest, of a pulse of light. But he cross-referenced the old biometric feeds from the human settlement now archived. He saw the spike. Hundreds of human heart rates elevated. Signs of adrenaline and fear. Then, at exactly 14:32 station time, a flatline. Not death, but a sudden, uniform drop into calm biometrics. Too perfect. It was the signature of the edict being applied. Kale leaned back. He had always imagined the edict as a gentle forgetting, like a fog rolling in to obscure an unpleasant view. The data told a colder story. It was a targeted, precise deletion. He thought of the humans below. Min with his plants. Lee with her files. Their stress spikes during sleep. They weren't malfunctioning. They were mourning. They were feeling grief for graves they could not find. He looked at the new anomaly report, the strange bioluminescent spike from the settlement. It had happened again several times now, always at night. Always in the same location. It was not aggression. It looked like gathering. Like remembrance. A conflict stirred within him. Quiet but deep. His duty was clear. Allow the calibration to proceed. Maintain the peace. But a new, unwelcome question formed. What was this peace built upon? He looked at the planet below, a green marble against the black. He did not cancel Velt's visit. But for the first time, he did not file a follow-up alert about the anomalies. He simply watched and wondered what the humans were doing down there in the dark. The news came quietly. A notification on the settlement's main screen. Inspector Velt of the Galactic Consensus would arrive in 3 days for a scheduled wellness calibration. The message was polite, spoke of care and harmony. To the humans who knew, it sounded like a death sentence for the truth. There was no panic. Instead, a grim focus settled over the small group. They met again in the archive basement. Tay had spread a hand-drawn map of the settlement on the table. Min brought a sealed box of the most potent Nisus flowers, their buds still closed. Lee placed the memory objects in the center, the button, the sock, the broken tools. They will scan us, G said. They will see the echo dream activity in our brains. They will flush it out. They will take it, Lee corrected softly. Again. Min looked at the objects. The pollen, it makes the memory external. It lives outside our minds, in the air, for a moment. They can't scan the air. Tay nodded slowly, tracing a circle around the main square on the map. If we are all holding our past, if we all bring it out at once, it becomes a fact in the present. Not a memory, an event. The plan was simple, and that was its strength. They would not fight. They would not shout. They would stand. When Inspector Velt came to perform his calibration, they would be waiting in the square. And they would show him what he was there to erase. They spent the next days preparing, but not with weapons. They prepared with stories. They visited others in the settlement, one by one, in their homes. They did not force. They simply asked about bad dreams, about sadness with no source. And then, carefully, they shared their own. They showed the hologram of the strike at the old square in small private rooms. They saw the shock, then the dawning recognition on their neighbors' faces. The unrecalled was a hole in every life. Now they were being shown the shape of the thing that made the hole. Some were afraid. They shut their doors. But many more listened. A man named June, a fisherman, dreamt of a cold lake. A woman named Hannah, a teacher, had echoes of a silent classroom. They found their own touchstones, a fishing knot, a piece of chalk. The group grew. Lee also prepared a different kind of defense. She compiled the data, the gaps in the logs, the biometric flatlines, the official, empty reports. She did not hide it. She placed it all on a public data slate, ready to be seen. It was a record of the erasure, made with the consensus's own numbers. On the morning of the inspection, the air was still. A light mist hung over Miziori. The consensus shuttle descended without sound, a smooth silver disc landing in the field beside the square. A ramp extended. Inspector Velt walked down. He was Lorvek like Kale, but where Kale seemed thoughtful, Velt was polished and smooth. His large dark eyes took in the settlement with polite detachment. A few assistants followed with scanning equipment that he expected to see humans waiting nervously, ready for their calibration. He expected a quiet, orderly process that he did not expect the square to be full. Nearly 100 humans stood in loose rows. They were not angry. They were not chanting. They were simply standing there, waiting. In their hands, they held ordinary things. A child's toy.
Ovornhot. A kishenpot.
Min and Lee stood at the front. Min held a clay pot with several Nisus plants. Lee held the public data slate. Velt paused. His assistants stopped behind him. "Greetings," Velt said, his voice amplified and calm. "We are here for your wellness calibration. Please proceed to the scanning stations by family group." No one moved. Velt's expression did not change, but a slight tension entered his posture. "Compliance is required for the harmony of the consensus." He stated that it was Lee who spoke. Her voice was clear, but not loud. "We wish to show you something first, so you understand what you are calibrating." Before Velt could refuse, Min lifted the clay pot. He shook it gently. The mature Nisus flowers, triggered by the motion and the dim morning light, released a cloud of silver pollen. The breeze caught it, carrying it over the front row of humans. At the same time, Lee raised the data slate. On it, the numbers glowed, the proof of the gap. The humans in the front row lifted their objects. They closed their eyes, thinking of their echo dreams, of their specific sorrow. The air in the square began to shimmer. Velt took a step back. "What is this? Cease this biological emission." But it was too late. The pollen, the emotion, the touchstones, they connected. Above the crowd, holograms flickered to life. Not one, but many. Patchwork of painful moments. The silent protest in the square. A mother losing hold of a child. A man dropping his tool in confusion. The pulse of white light. The blank, peaceful faces afterward. The images were ghostly and overlapping. A storm of unrecalled truth. Velt stood frozen. His scanners beeped wildly, not detecting weapons, but detecting profound, organized neurological activity and unknown biomatter. His training had not prepared him for this. The edict dealt with memory, with things inside the mind. This was outside. This was evidence. He watched a hologram of a younger version of Tay standing firm, then going blank. He saw the grief on Lee's face in the memory, mirrored on her face now. He saw the data on the slate, his own people's data, telling a different story from the official one. "This is a disruption," Velt said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. He was not looking at a riot. He was looking at a silent exhibition of his own civilization's crime. To use force here would be to create a new, undeniable event. To erase this, he would have to witness it fully, making the memory stronger. The humans simply stood, holding their pasts in the light. They said no word of protest. They just made the forgotten, for one fragile moment, impossible to ignore. They had turned their own minds into a museum, and the entrance fee was simply to look. The square was silent except for the low hum of the holograms. The silver images of old pain floated above the still humans. Inspector Velt did not move. His mind, trained for procedure, raced through possibilities. His mandate was clear: restore calm and apply the edict. But how do you erase something that is happening right now in front of you? To erase it, he would have to record it, to process it. That would make the memory part of his official report, creating a paradox. One of his assistants, a younger Lorvek, raised a small device. It was a neutralizer, designed to emit a frequency that would disrupt neural patterns and put a crowd into a passive state. It was the first step of a field calibration. "Do not," Velt said, the word sharp in the quiet. The assistant hesitated. Velt took a step forward, into the edge of the shimmering pollen cloud. He felt a strange tingling. He saw more clearly the hologram directly in front of Min. It showed the pulse of light from a consensus device and the terrible, empty peace that followed. Velt had authorized such pulses. He had seen the peaceful after effects. He had never seen the before. He had never seen the determined faces, the fear, the love that was there just a moment before the light. The erasure was clean in the reports. Here, it was shown as a violent amputation. "You are displaying unrecalled data," Velt said to Lee, his voice tighter now. "This is a violation of galactic harmony." Lee kept the data slate raised. "This is what you unrecalled. We are not violating harmony. We are showing you the cost of it." In the orbital station, Kale watched. The live feed from Velt's shuttle was blurred with static. The pollen interfered with the sensors. But he could see enough. He saw the crowd standing firm. He saw the ghostly images. He saw Velt standing frozen. Kale's own calm felt brittle. This was not a rebellion. It was a presentation. A trial where the evidence was the crime itself. Down in the square, the standoff stretched. Minutes passed. No one moved. The humans held their positions. Some had tears on their faces, but their hands were steady. The physical effort of remembering, of making the memory solid, was draining. But they did not break. Tay, from the middle of the crowd, spoke. His old voice was rough but carried. "You can turn on your light, Inspector. You can make us forget this morning, too. But then you will have to forget you did it. And the next time you come, we will have forgotten why we are afraid of you, but we will still feel the whole. And we will find this truth again. It is in our soil now." Velt looked at the Nisus flowers in Min's pot. He understood. This was not a human weapon. It was a human remedy, a way to heal their own broken memories. But in healing themselves, they had exposed a sickness in the consensus itself. "Your actions force a response," Velt stated, trying to regain control. "The edict exists to prevent endless cycles of grievance." "We have no grievance," Min said, his voice quieter than Tay's. He looked tired. "We have a fact. You took something from us. We just want you to see what you took. Once you see it, then you decide what to do. But you will decide knowing." This was the trap, Velt realized. It was a trap made of transparency. If he used force, he proved their point, that the consensus's peace required violence and more forgetting. If he did nothing, the edict in this sector was broken. If he walked away, the story of this silent stand would spread. Even without official channels, he turned to his assistant. "Scan the biological particles in the air. Full analysis." The assistant fumbled with a device. A beam of light swept through the silver dust. Readings flashed. "It is a complex organic compound, Inspector. It binds with specific neurochemicals associated with emotional memory. It seems to externalize them into a temporary energy form. It is not harmful. It is communicative." Communicative. The word hung in the air. They were not being attacked. They were being spoken to. Velt made a decision. It was not a final decision, but a stall. "This gathering is an unscheduled event. You will disperse. This demonstration will be reviewed. The calibration is postponed until a full assessment is made." He turned and walked back toward his shuttle, his steps stiff. His assistants followed, confused. The ramp closed. The shuttle lifted silently, retreating to a holding position high above. The moment the shuttle sealed, the tension in the square broke. A few humans slumped to their knees, exhausted. The holograms flickered and died as the concentration broke. Min set the clay pot down, his hands shaking. Lee lowered the data slate. She looked at the faces around her. They were wet with sweat and tears, but their eyes were alive with a new light. They had done it. They had not been erased. They had held the line. But Tay came over, putting a hand on her shoulder and Min's. "It is not over," he said softly. He did not say yes. He did not say no. He said, wait. We have shown him the wound. Now we see if his conscience is real, or if he just fetches a bigger bandage. Above, in his shuttle, Velt was staring at his own hands. He could still see the afterimage of the holograms on his vision. The silent scream of the woman. He opened a channel to the orbital station. Kale, you observed. Kale's voice came back neutral. I did. Your assessment? Velt asked. Kale was silent for a long moment. He looked at the planet below, at the small green settlement. He thought of his own work of neatly deleting files for the greater good. He saw Min's tired, honest face in his mind. My assessment, Kale said slowly, is that the calibration protocol is insufficient. The subject has complicated the procedure. He did not say the humans were wrong. He did not say they were right. He merely stated that their action had changed the equation. It was the first small crack in the wall of certainty. The quiet that settled over Miziori was not peaceful. It was the quiet of a held breath. The people in the square drifted back to their homes, but nothing was normal. They moved like people waiting for a storm to either hit or pass by. Min stayed in his greenhouse, tending the Nisus flowers with a new urgency. Lee and Tay worked in the archive, checking every data line, preparing more .in orbit. The silence was different. It was the silence of a machine trying to compute an illogical problem. Inspector Velt remained in his shuttle, refusing to land again. He sent his data packets to the regional consensus hub. He requested guidance. He described the biological mnemonic display and noted the non-aggressive but non-compliant posture. He did not use the words protest or rebellion. He stuck to facts, but the facts were damning enough. Kale on the station monitored everything. He saw Velt's reports go out. He saw the automated acknowledgments come back. Then he saw the alert he had been dreading. The report had been flagged for review by a higher authority. The Central Consensus Directorate on Lorvec Prime had been notified. The human problem was no longer a local matter. He knew what that meant. The Directorate did not send new inspectors. It sent adjudicators. And adjudicators did not calibrate. They resolved. Their tools were more final. Options like planetary quarantine or selective neural resetting of an entire population were on their table. The peace would be preserved at a calculated cost. Kale looked at the feed from the settlement. He watched Min watering plants. He watched Lee helping an elderly neighbor. They were not monsters. They were not warriors. They were just people who refused to forget a specific, painful afternoon. Their crime was memory. A deep, old feeling stirred in Kale. It was a feeling his people had worked for generations to erase from themselves. Ethical discomfort. The edict was clean in theory, but seeing its result, raw and displayed by its victims, made it feel dirty. Was harmony built on buried bones truly harmony? He made a choice. It was not a grand, heroic choice. It was a small, technical one. He prepared a private data packet. Into it, he copied Velt's raw sensor feed from the square, the shimmering pollen, the holograms, the humans' faces. He added the old biometric data from the strike, the proof of the flatline. He compiled Lee's evidence of the gaps. He did not analyze it. He did not comment on it. He simply put it all together, a complete record of the event as it truly was, not as it would be officially unrecalled. Then he encrypted it, not with official consensus codes, but with an older, simpler one, a historian's personal archive code. He attached a single line of text as the file name, Miziori primary source material. He did not send it to the directorate. Instead, he uploaded it to a dead-drop server, a dusty corner of the galactic network where amateur historians and xenobotanists sometimes shared odd findings. It would be found, eventually, by someone curious. It would become a ghost in the machine, an undeletable truth because it was no longer official. He had just broken a core protocol. He felt no thrill, only a heavy coldness. He had potentially ended his career. Down on Miziori, the humans' new time was short. The official message came to their main screen. It was brief and colder than Velt's. Adjudicator envoy inbound. Stand by for resolution. The words sent a chill through the settlement. Tay called the core group together. They are sending the end of the discussion, he said. So we make sure the discussion isn't over, Lee replied. Her eyes were hard. We have one more move. We don't show them the past this time. Min looked up from his hands, which were stained with silver pollen. What do we show them? We show them the present, Lee said. We show them what it looks like when you choose to remember. We don't just hold up the bad memory. We hold up the act of holding it. The plan formed. It was even simpler and even more dangerous. They would not wait in the square. They would go about their day. But they would carry the Nisus flowers with them. They would wear them in their hair, pin them to their clothes, place them in their tool belts. And if the adjudicators' people tried to take them or scan them or flush them, they would activate the pollen right where they stood, in the nursery, in the fields, in the workshops. They would turn the entire settlement into a living museum of the moment. The crime would not be in one place. It would be everywhere. They prepared quietly. Min and his helpers harvested every bloom. They were distributed in small vials, in pockets, in lunch pails. The instruction was simple. Live your life. But if the forgetting starts, remember. Out loud. Kale watched them prepare via his sensors. He saw the distribution of biomatter. He understood their intent. They were not making a stand. They were becoming a condition, a fact on the ground. To resolve them, the consensus would have to touch every single person, in every single place, and witness every single memory. The cost of erasure would become astronomically high. The adjudicator's ship arrived. It was larger, darker, and shaped like a silent arrow. It did not hail the settlement. It did not announce its plans. It simply took position next to Velt's shuttle, a shadow next to Silver. Kale received the direct command from the new ship. It was from the adjudicator herself. Station Historian Kale. Transmit all predictive models for full population neural reset. Include collateral damage estimates for ecosystem. They were not even considering negotiation. They were calculating the cleanup. Kale looked at the command. He looked at the feet of Min handing a flower to a little girl in the settlement, showing her how to gently tap the petals. He thought of his data packet, already floating free in the network, that he typed his reply, his fingers steady. Models are incomplete. Subject population has integrated the mnemonic agent with daily biological functions. A full reset would require a level of granular intervention equivalent to documenting each memory individually. The act of documentation may reinforce the memory pathogen. Request clarification on protocol. He was not refusing. He was not lying. He was stating a problem. He was, for the first time, using his historian's mind not to clean up history, but to point out its messy, living complexity. He hit send. Then he turned off his main console, sat in the dim light of his station, and waited. He had just tied the situation into a knot of bureaucratic impossibility. The next move was theirs. And while they calculated, the humans below went on living, their pockets full of silver flowers, waiting to bloom. The silence from the arrow-shaped ship felt heavier than gravity. Down in the settlement, people tried to live normally. Min worked in his greenhouse. Lee sorted archive files. June mended his fishing nets. But in every pocket, on every belt, a small vial or a dried bloom rested. The air itself felt charged with waiting. Kale's message had done its work. It had introduced doubt into a system that ran on certainty. The adjudicator, a Lorvek named Mira, reviewed his words. Memory pathogen. It was a clever term. It framed the human act not as rebellion, but as an infection. And infections required study before eradication. Her mandate was to resolve, but a rushed resolution that created a more resistant strain was a failure. She sent a new command. Not to Kale, but to Inspector Velt. You made first contact with the phenomenon. Descend. Initiate a standard scan on a single subject. Isolate the effect. Report. It was a test. A small, controlled experiment. Velt received the order with a sinking feeling. He knew he was being used as a probe. If things went wrong, he was the expendable one. But he had no choice. His silver shuttle descended again, landing once more by the square. This time it was empty. The humans were not gathered. They were in their homes, their gardens, their workshops, watching. Velt stepped out with 2 assistants. He chose the nearest dwelling. It was the home of the old engineer, Tay. The door was open. Tay sat at a small table, polishing a piece of machinery. A single Nisus flower in a thin glass tube lay beside his elbow. "Engineer Tay," Velt said, standing in the doorway. "You will submit to a neural scan. Now." Tay looked up. He did not look afraid. He looked tired and a little sad. "You know what you will find," Tay said. "The scan will determine that," Velt replied, his voice official. One assistant raised a handheld scanner. Tay nodded slowly. He did not resist. But as the assistant stepped forward, Tay picked up the glass tube. He didn't throw it. He simply uncorked it and held it up to his own face, inhaling the faint silver dust. Then he placed his other hand on the old, polished piece of machinery, a bearing housing from a broken water pump. The scanner beeped, targeting Tay's head. But at the same moment, the air around Tay shimmered. A hologram bloomed between him and the Lorvek. It was not of the strike. It was a simpler, older memory. A younger Tay, teaching his own son how to fit this very bearing. The boy's face was concentrated, then bright with success. Then the hologram shifted. It showed the same boy, years older, standing in the old square. It showed the pulse of light. It showed the boy's face going blank. It ended with present-day Tay, sitting alone at his table, polishing the bearing that no longer had a machine to go into. The memory was not loud or violent. It was a story of love, skill, loss, and quiet loneliness. It was the story of what the edict truly took. Connection. The assistant with the scanner froze, the device whirring uselessly. It was recording, but it was recording the hologram, the evidence. To scan the memory, it had to capture it first. Velt stared. This was worse than the square. This was intimate. This was a man's heart, broken open and displayed not in anger, but in simple, devastating truth. The pathogen was not hate. It was grief. "Your scan will record my memory," Tay said softly, his eyes on the fading hologram. "To erase it from me, you must first have it in your machine. Will you erase your machine's memory too? And then the machine that erases that one? Where does it end?" Up in the station, Kale watched the live feed. He saw Velt's shoulders slump. He saw the assistant lower the scanner, unsure what to do. The procedure had no answer for this. At that moment, Lee appeared at the door of the next house. Then Min stepped out from the greenhouse path. Then others. They did not approach. They just stood visible. Each one held a small silver flower. They were not blocking Velt's exit. They were simply present. They were showing him the scale of the task. One man's memory had just paralyzed the procedure. Here were 100 more. Velt turned and looked at them. He looked at their calm, resolved faces. He looked back at Tay, who had put the cork back in his tube. The experiment was over. The result was catastrophic for the consensus protocol. Velt spoke into his wrist calm, his voice stripped of all official pride. "Adjudicator. The standard scan is non-viable. The mnemonic agent is linked to episodic memory tied to physical touchstones. Scanning reinforces the memory's external pathway. Isolation is impossible without first documenting the subject memory, thereby spreading it. The infection is procedural. I cannot comply with the order without exacerbating the situation." There was a long, empty silence from the Arrow ship. Then, a new command, this time for both of them. "Return to orbit. All units, stand down." It was not a victory. It was a retreat. Velt and his assistants walked quickly back to their shuttle, not looking back. The dark Arrow ship did not move. In the square, the humans slowly came together. No one cheered. Tay joined them, still holding his bearing. They stood in a loose group, looking up at the 2 ships hanging in the sky. "They're leaving?" G asked, hope tight in his voice. "No," Lee said, watching the dark ship. "They are thinking. They are calculating a new cost. We have made forgetting more expensive than remembering. For now." Min put his hand on her shoulder. "And Kale?" he asked quietly. "The one in the station." He helped. His message changed their words. Lee nodded. She looked up at the station. A tiny silver in the blue sky. He saw it. He chose to see it. That is all we asked for. In his station, Kale received the stand-down order. He also received a separate, encrypted message from Adjudicator Mira. It contained one line: "Your primary source material has been noted. Prepare for debriefing." They knew. They had found his data packet. His career was over. He would be recalled, mind-scrubbed, and reassigned to some meaningless task that he felt a strange calm. He looked at the green world below. He had done his duty to the peace for centuries. Today, for the first time, he felt he had done something that was simply right. He had not saved the humans. He had merely refused to look away. And in doing so, he had given the Adjudicator a way out that didn't require slaughter. A bureaucratic, face-saving way to withdraw and call it a study. He packed a single small bag. He did not know what would happen next. But as he prepared to leave the station, he realized he was not afraid of forgetting. For the first time, he had a memory he hoped he would get to keep. The arrow-shaped ship left first. It turned without a word and slipped into the star-streaked dark, its job unresolved. Inspector Velt's shuttle followed soon after. The sky over Miziori was empty again, holding only the sun and the small, distant moon. No victory was declared. The people of the settlement returned to their work, but the work was different now. The air felt lighter, yet their steps were more careful, as if the ground was both familiar and new. They had not won a war. They had survived a test. The question of what the consensus would do next hung in the air, a quiet hum beneath the sounds of daily life. Weeks passed. The official records showed nothing unusual. The logs for that season on Miziori noted only standard agricultural output and stable population metrics. The day of the stand in the square, the visit of Velt, the silent demonstration in Tay's doorway, none of it existed in the Galactic Consensus Archive. By the highest law, it was unrecalled. But on Miziori, they remembered. They tended the Nisus flowers, which now grew in small, protected plots in many gardens. The flowers were a quiet promise. A promise to never again lose the why behind their feelings. One afternoon, a small, unmarked pod descended. It was not a consensus design. It landed near Min's greenhouse. A single figure emerged. It was Kale. He wore simple clothes, not a historian's uniform. His bag was small. He looked older, and there was a calm weariness in his large eyes. Min found him standing at the edge of the flower field, just looking. "You came back," Min said, not as a question, but as a recognition. "I was released from my duties," Kale said. His voice was softer without the station comms. "My actions were deemed a conflict of interest." The Adjudicator's report stated that the Miziori situation required long-term, low-impact observation. "My familiarity with the subjects made me suitable for the observer role." Min understood. It was a story, a way for the consensus to step back without admitting defeat. Kale had not been punished. He had been buried here, assigned to watch over the very thing he had helped preserve. It was a quiet, elegant solution for everyone. "What will you observe?" Min asked. Kale looked at the silver flowers. "How a memory lives, not as a ghost, but as a seed." Lee walked out from the archive to join them. She nodded to Kale, a deep, respectful nod. "Thank you," she said. Simple words holding everything. "I did not do it for you," Kale said, honest. "I did it because I finally saw the crack in our perfect peace. I could not unsee it. My action was for my own people's future, too. A peace that cannot look at its own past is a peace built on fear." Tay brought tea, and they sat outside the greenhouse. They did not speak of big things. They spoke of soil, of rainfall, of the best way to dry the Nisus pollen. Kale asked questions, and he listened. He was not their overseer. He was a new neighbor, a strange one, learning the rules of a new world as the months turned. Kale built a small house. He helped Min in the greenhouse. He learned the names of the plants. He ate meals with Lee and talked about data patterns that were not about gaps but about growth. Sometimes, in the evenings, someone would bring a touchstone, an old picture, a piece of music. They would share a memory, not just of pain, but of joy from before, or of small moments from the standoff itself. They practiced remembering everything, not just the sorrow. Kale never experienced an echo dream. His mind did not work that way, but he began to remember in a different manner. He remembered the taste of the tea made. He remembered the sound of Lee's laugh. He remembered the determined set of Min's shoulders as he worked. These were his touchstones. One evening, under the light of the moon, Lee and Kale planted a new row of Nisa's flowers. Kale's hands, now often stained with earth, worked beside hers. "The galaxy's records will never mention what happened here," Lee said, placing a seed carefully into the soil. "I know," Kale said. "They will not study it. They will not teach it. It will be a blank space." "Yes." Lee patted the soil firm and looked at him. "Then what was it for?" Kale sat back on his heels. He looked at the settlement, where lights were coming on in windows. He looked at the stars, where the consensus ships did not come anymore. "It was not for the galaxy's memory," he said slowly, finding the words as he spoke them. "It was for our own. Before, you remembered only the ghost of a wound. Now, you remember the day you chose to heal it. You remember your own strength. And he paused. "I remember the day I chose to see. That moment is not in any history, but it is in us. It is in this soil. That is where true history lives." He was right. No civilization would recall the day humans said, "Enough." It was not a battle in their timelines. It was not a treaty in their databases. But on a green world at the edge of the map, a Lorvek and a human planted seeds in a quiet garden. They remembered a silence that spoke. They tended a truth that grew not in files, but in lives. And in that simple daily act, in the remembering and the choosing and the living, the peace that finally began was not perfect and it was not universal. But it was real, and it was theirs.